A heavy capex allocation of 7.5 lakh crore rupees for FY23, conservative tax revenue, a goal at 9.5%, 30% tax on income from transfer of digital assets, surcharge on long-term capital gains tax capped at 15%, and emergency credit line guarantee scheme for MSMEs extended by 1 year. These are some of the key highlights of what the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presented in her budget. Hello and welcome to our budget special. I am Prashant Nair, and joining me to discuss the budget are top minds of India Inc. The Associated Chambers of Commerce and Industry is joining in on this panel in full force. Vineet Agarwal, President and ASSOCHAM and Managing Director of Transport Corporation of India is with us. Sumant Sinha is Senior Vice President, ASSOCHAM and Chairman at ReNew Power. Also on the show is Ajay Singh, Vice President, ASSOCHAM and Chairman and Managing Director of SpiceJet. Chirag Baijal is Co-Chairman, Manufacturing and Capital Goods Council at ASSOCHAM. He's also the Managing Director of Carrier India. Gentlemen, great to have all of you here. Thank you very much for joining us on this special program. Vineet, if I can start with you, just first brief thoughts on what you really took away from the budget today.
Hi. Predominantly, I think the budget has been very transparent in its intent from the last year itself. And we've seen that with vaccination confidence coming around, there is a certain level of confidence that has come in with the way the budget is also getting presented. Clearly, consistency and continuity of the tax rates, etc., is very, very encouraging, because that ensures that domestic and even international investors take a very long-term view on the country. And that is one of the reasons why we can then look at a more stable growth trajectory for the next few years. The second most important thing is the expenditure on the capex on infrastructure, which is pegged at about 2.9% of GDP. That's a really, really good number, because this has a very deep trickle-down effect, about 2 to 3 times, not just on the specific industry, but also on all other industries related to infrastructure. It's a high employment creation sector as well. The other expenditure on health, education, etc., are all been maintained, and in some cases it has gone up. So we are quite excited by that. And the overall linkages that the Honorable Finance Minister talked about, Finance Minister talked about the with multimodal with logistics. I think that is also very enthusing.
No, absolutely. I mean, the focus on infrastructure has been maintained and allocations have been increased. So very large numbers there. Sumant, if I can come to you, I'm sure you'll be enthused by what we've heard on the infrastructure side. At the margin, though, a plethora of people we spoke with before the budget were expecting that there should be something on boosting consumption right now. I mean, that is the need of the hour. Have we seen that addressed according to you, apart from, of course, all that has been done on the infrastructure side?
I think you have to look at the government's overall philosophy. And I think right from the beginning, this government has always believed in building the country, building the infrastructure, building capacity, and using those investments then to drive demand growth as well. So it may be a little bit less direct, but I think longer term will lead to a much more sustainable and robust growth. So I think this government has always taken the long view. And that's what they're doing even now. Instead of cutting taxes or putting money in people's hands and then expecting them to spend, I think they've really focused on how to actually create or increase the productive capacity of the economy. And to me, that's in fact, in some ways, the right way to go. Because, if you look at it right now, with the whole issue of COVID already being somewhat settled, I think consumer confidence is coming back. We're already seeing that in rising inflation to some extent. So as consumer confidence is coming back, people are going to start spending again. I don't think that you need it at this time to put in more money in people's hands. I think that demand is going to come back on a natural basis. And in fact, it's already come back. That's why we've seen growth at 9%. And that's why we're looking at growth at 8% in the future as well. So I don't think you need to really stimulate any extra demand right now. You really needed to focus on continuing to build the economy. And I think that's the decision the government has taken. And so, putting in 35%, looking at greening the whole economy. I think those are the areas of focus which are, I think, much more long-term and sustainable from the country's standpoint. So I would agree with the way the government has gone about it this time.
Mr. Singh, your initial take?
I think just to add to what Vineet and Sumant said, I think the other interesting piece about this budget is that it talks a lot about technology and what technology can do for the country. I mean, if you look at the word digital, I don't think ever in the history of modern India has digital been used so often in a budget speech. This whole, if you look at any sector, whether it's health or whether it's education, look at the digital universities that are sought to be created, this one class, one TV, the Kisan drones, 5G being rolled out this year, all these portals that they've suggested for logistics, for skill development, for in every which way, it is a very technology heavy budget. Think of the digital rupee itself and the encouragement to digital payments. So I think it is a futuristic budget. It looks at the spaces or the fields of the future, the digital spaces, greening of the economy, as Sumant was just saying. This whole concept of green bonds, of battery exchanges. So in a sense, a really, really interesting budget, futuristic budget. This whole ease of doing business has been given a big fillip as well, in terms of, this establishment of trust between the assessee and the tax collectors, by way of being able to refile your returns. So some very interesting pieces to this budget, I think. And so, from our side, all of us at ASSOCHAM really commend the finance minister for what is, I think, one of the best budgets in recent memory.
Chirag, would you concur? What would you like to add? Opening remarks from you?
So Prashant, growth mindset is what came to my mind when I actually looked at the narrative. And for that to be, it is progressive in nature. And the reason I say that is because the rear view mirror of how we've seen, let's say, manufacturing in the last about 15 years in India in GDP contribution has remained range bound between 14 to 16%. And we all know that manufacturing stands out when it comes to job creation. For every job created, it's more than 10 indirect jobs that we put on the table with that. Now, whether it's India for India or it's India for the world kind of a story that will play itself out, capex on the infrastructure and being a catalyst for private investment to come in becomes a very important area for us to look at. It's been a hectic day talking about a lot of that already. But I think I also want to underscore the importance of another area which often gets, I think, overlooked in a budget narrative. Ajay did speak about this briefly, is digitalization and process reform. So it's not everything about policy reform. It's about a lot to do with ease of doing business. So EODB 2.0 and a lot more of that, which I'm personally looking forward to. And the way that the process can lead to more, not just efficiencies, it can lead to more creation of fiscal space, if you ask me, by reducing the wage bill of the government. And then eventually also the entire corruption perception that India carries in the rest of the world right now.
Sumant, on the fiscal deficit side, it seems to be slightly. You could have looked at the bond market reaction today. So they've expanded the deficit a little bit, maybe a little more than what was expected. But at the same time, tax receipt assumptions, which usually are actually very optimistic, are actually conservative, looking at what the government has already been able to collect so far this year. How would you look at that? I mean, the fiscal math itself.
Look, I haven't gone into the details of the numbers, but just looking at the headline numbers of 6.8 was the target last year. We achieved 6.9, despite the buoyancy in the numbers. And so therefore, obviously, spends also went up in some way. Now the glide path is set at 6.5 for the coming year, with an expectation to get to 4.5 3-4 years down the road. So the government has not really tried to really traverse a long way towards 4.5. And I think that makes sense given in some ways, still the vulnerability of the economy, given COVID issues and the uncertainties surrounding that. So I'm quite comfortable with the view the government has taken to tighten a little bit, but not really go too far along the way, and then end up needlessly tightening the economy. Now, the bond market usually knows best because obviously it's a very liquid market. People are very smart in that market, and so if bond credits have tightened, it is probably because they feel that despite the tax buoyancy, the overall borrowing program is going to go up. There is obviously also the issue about inflation. And I think the rising interest rates are going to act as a dampener to growth. And therefore, you might see the RBI stepping in to try to make sure that monetary kind of policy comes in to support fiscal policy right now. And so therefore, I think that is something that might very well happen as well now.
Mr. Singh, just on that point, in terms of, market interest rates rose today, and expectations are that, it's a global cycle as well at the end of the day. Interest rates are set to rise a little bit. In the Indian context, if divestments do not happen in time and the collections are not what they, what was budgeted, although this time, the numbers are much more realistic, that may lead to hardening of interest rates. Your thoughts, Mr. Sinha? Sorry, Mr. Singh. That's for you.
Okay. So, I think I think some rate tightening is probably inevitable this year because the Fed is expected to tighten. I think as the economy grows, as consumption goes up, it's quite likely that inflation might rise and the RBI might step in to dampen inflation, raise rates a little bit. I think we have to all factor that in to the narrative of this year.
Vineet, before COVID struck, right? Growth was at about 4.5%. Actually, the exit growth rate in March of 2020 was just under 4% or so. We've come a long way, right? Tax collections have been extremely buoyant. Formalization has picked up meaningfully, and government has been very, very fiscally conservative and walked the tightrope. Do you think this budget provides the runway for growth to meaningfully accelerate from here? Because many did fear that the nominal GDP growth assumptions which have been made perhaps were a little too aggressive. For example, in FY22, we started with growth, assuming that growth will come in at about 12% or so. We are just northwards of 9% now. So there has been a bit of taper which has happened. But with this budget for FY23, do you think it provides enough headroom for growth?
Yes, certainly. I think, if we look at the estimates of about 8.5% for next year, we have to look at what are the other components that is going to drive this growth. Clearly, the private sector capacity utilization currently is not there yet to start making fresh capex. So at some point in time, and rightly so, the government is stepping in with the extra expenditure on infrastructure, on the other PLI schemes and other such areas, including the defense-related areas, that will step up some of that investment so that the private sector also starts coming in with their investment. So any additional incremental capital that has to come in will be once this government starts pushing the expenditure down. So in terms of the overall path towards this 8.5%, it seems to be quite attractive. And also, I think the deficit is also in some ways managed, and in the sense that I think for the first time, they've been, as Sumant also said, very, very conservative in terms of what the expectations are in terms of revenue. So I do believe that revenue will be much higher than what they are projecting. And I do believe that with the expenditure plan that they have, we are on a good path towards this accelerated growth program.
Chirag, comment on that point about capacity utilization. You'd have a sort of a real bird's eye view of what's happening there across industries. Is that likely to pick up? Is private capex likely to pick up? Are you seeing signs of that? Or the government will still have to continue to do most of the heavy lifting?
So I think for the next... Sorry, go ahead, Chirag, go ahead. So on both accounts, Shant, the answer is that after a long time, we saw the capex cycle pick up in the last about 2 quarters. And I really hope that momentum sustains because it is directly linked with not just capacity, but also the corporate's ability to start earning. And this is not just a capitalist mindset, but it is about job creation and further investments. So I do see that on capacity, a larger section continues to be anywhere between 60% to about 80%. But the outlook is that this 80% number may go up to about 90% as well for about at least 15 to 20% of the manufacturing segment. Sorry, Vineet, you were saying something.
No, go on. Finish that point, Chirag. Go on.
The fact that, they've struggled with semiconductors shortages. And that once it picks up and definitely in the second half of the year or Q2 onwards, we do expect that to happen. And that's a huge multiplier effect immediately on the overall capacity utilization of other ancillary units.
Okay, got that. Let's talk about sort of specific stuff. Sumant, we have that additional 19,500 crore rupees for the PLI scheme to boost solar manufacturing, which came through in the budget. How did that that announcement for your sector rate against what you were hoping would find mention in the budget?
Prashant, I've learned through experience never to expect anything specific in the budget because the budget can only do so much. I think you have to look at the totality of the government's policies. Just leading into the budget, just for the green sector, they announced 1,000 odd crores infusion into IRIDA. They allocated certain amount of money to MNRE. Lots of policy decisions have been made, which actually make the whole sector a lot better, a lot more attractive, and so on. So I think from that standpoint, it's just it's just one specific step that was included of the government's entire program in the budget from a solar manufacturing. Positive because obviously they got the scheme, a lot of people applied for it, and by allocating more now, hopefully everybody who applied will actually get it, and that might lead to 50,000 megawatts of capacity in solar manufacturing coming up, which would actually make India the second largest manufacturing country in solar after China, and actually make India a credible alternative supplier into the rest of the world. So I think it's a fairly impactful scheme. But in addition to that, the finance minister also announced the issues around battery swappings, schemes, then making storage or batteries a part of the infrastructure sector. She also announced the sovereign green bonds, other stuff on financing, the whole green sector. And then, of course, on the DISCOM side, she talked about the fact that extra allocation of fiscal deficit of 1% to the states would, have about 0.5% for DISCOM reform issues. So there were quite a few issues that were spread around here and there beyond just the solar PLI bit. So I think the government is very serious about greening the economy. And through a number of steps, including what the FM announced in the budget today, I think they are showing their intent to go down that path.
So we have pretty large targets, don't we? I mean, which were set out earlier by 2030. And the current rate of greening has to pick up quite a bit more in terms of renewable energy capacity creation. Does this budget do enough, or you think you'd watch out for more steps outside of the budget? And what specifically, in your opinion?
There are several things that actually have to be done. Of those, the biggest really is the issue of the DISCOM reforms. That unfortunately is sitting with the state governments. The center is trying its best through various schemes to encourage states to go down that path. But, with the kind of populism we have, politicians keep promising free power and so on. So that's something a little bit on the back burner. And then there's a national green hydrogen policy that is just about to come out. That's the other big leg. And the third leg is really around batteries. And on the battery front, the government did announce certain things. Our view was that they could have decreased the customs duty on batteries to essentially bring the cost down and really move it forward faster. That's something that they have not done as yet. Hopefully, they'll consider doing it in the future.
We need on the transport side. Any specifics you want to highlight which are important? I mean, for your industry allied sectors.
This is the first time that the word logistics was used more than 10 times in the budget. So clearly it has a lot of importance, not just from the infrastructure perspective, but the fact that bringing down logistics costs will make our country more competitive. So just the PM Gati Shakti program, which is a multimodal program linking all kinds of modes of transport. Road transport today takes about 60-65% of overall freight, and that's really not tenable for our future. We need to shift more towards rail or towards coastal shipping. And for that, this program will be very critical. The 100 terminals that have been announced, or the 4 MMLPs, or just the fact that many of these modes of transport will get linked, and through a digital logistics platform, the logistics stack that is getting created will definitely help to bring down the logistics cost.
Mr. Singh, same question to you. From a sector perspective, anything which kind of stood out to you in this budget?
Sectorally, I think the highway program is very, very attractive. 25,000 kilometers, which means that the current rate would double, literally from 35, 40 kilometers to almost 70 kilometers. So again, very, very critical. It has a multiplier effect, as we know. And it will lead to perhaps even the revitalization of the commercial vehicle sector, and just generally the overall, and in line with the growth of the economy as well.
Okay, just bringing Mr. Singh also in. Mr. Singh, to your mind, sectorally speaking, for your industry or any other sector, which really stood out in this budget for you?
Well, I think as far as our sector is concerned, that's not really caught the attention of the finance minister. Of course, aviation has been extremely stressed in this time of COVID. And while we expect demand to pick up as Omicron sort of withdraws, and of course, as there's more spending in the economy, there's more money in the pockets of people, travel will certainly go up. But we are in a place where taxation in our sector is extremely high. Every 100 rupees that we collect by way of revenue, about 23 or 24 rupees goes as taxes to the state and central government. And that's clearly unsustainable. I mean, this whole dream that India has always had of being a global hub for aviation, much like Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Doha, I think we are quite far from it. We need the attention of the policymakers to ensure that we use the dividend that we have of the significant population and the significant economic growth that we expect to have over the next several years to become a major aviation hub, both for passenger traffic, for cargo, for all logistics and cargo, and a major hub for maintenance and repair operations and training. So we have wonderful, wonderful possibilities. Absolutely an incredible opportunity. But I think we still need to get the attention of the policymakers.
All right. Lots of possibilities exist. I mean, budget is just but one day, and a lot can be done and has been done outside of the budget as well. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Singh, Sumant, Vineet, Chirag. Thank you very much for joining us on this special program.